Summer of Night. I'm reading his second. He apparently Dan Simmons. See, I should say this too. This is going to color my review a little bit. But the reason I even stumbled across Summer of Night, it's a horror novel by Dan Simmons, is that I was looking for books that were similar to it. Not necessarily copies of it, but books that dealt with that same similar theme. This is how, a scholar works. When you get kind of obsessed with an idea or something that you really want to study, you want to go out there and find all the incarnations of it, and especially from a cultural studies aspect like I do, you really want to find study where how this idea expresses itself in different contexts or in different people's art and whatnot. And I just love the idea of it, Stephen King's It, that idea, as he says, sort of the Billy Goat's gruff, the idea of the troll underneath a community, and there's a lot more to that. The group of kids who have this sort of bond between them, and there are some forces of good that are kind of imbuing these kids with this power to fight this beneath the city and whatnot. Now I know that especially after reading Floating Dragon, Stephen King just ripped off a ton of things from Floating Dragon. But I'll say he actually, if you had to tell him, if you put both books together and I had to choose one which was done better, I would say it. There are reasons for that I'll go in. Well, maybe we'll start with Floating Dragon since I mentioned that. But that's how I stumbled across Children or Summer of Darkness too. Or Summer of Night. I'm sorry, I keep getting the name all kinds of wrong because Dan Simmons wrote a trilogy of these horror novels that deal with some of the same characters across the three of them. Maybe more, but these three are what I know of. And it starts with The Summer of Night, and the second one is Children of the Night that I'm currently listening to on Audible now. But you can go back to some of these fairy tales. You can go back to children's tales like Billy Goes Gruff or something like that for this. But Peter Straub's Floating Dragon, I'd heard about it, once I read it and I loved it. And I heard that Peter Straub Floating Dragon was a similar story with a similar kind of concept, and that Stephen King had pulled a lot from it. And he really did pull a lot from this. This is not available unabridged on audio. You do have to read it. Nice big novel, but it's a good read. Definitely read it. I've got an old copy that I've found. It's like an old library copy, but I just laminated it and rolled with it. So I do recommend it. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. And Peter Straub, as I've said before, he's kind of been described as the thinking man, Stephen King. And sometimes that works well for him. It worked well for him with Ghost Story. Ghost Story is a phenomenal novel. Oh man, it's just so good. I always recommend that. And he's written some other novels that I read by him that are just really, really good. He won't bother taking the time, which I think is good. I don't think you need to. He writes for a smarter reader. Like there's a character, I'm not going to provide any spoilers, but there's a character in Floating Dragon, a number of characters, so it's not really telling you anything, but there's a character in Floating Dragon who's kind of not obsessed, but a part of his story and arc is he had an absent father. And going and looking after father figures was kind of a thing in his life and his childhood and whatnot, and always wondering what happened to his father and wanting to know more about his father, would his father have been proud of him and so forth. And there's a scene in the novel at one point in which he's got his son, his infant son, and he's at a cafe, and he sees his father. He sees his father. He knows that's his father. And he walks up to the man, and I'm not going to say any names or whatever, but he says, if the man's name is John Smith, he named his son after this absent father that he had. And he walks up to the man and said, John Smith, meet John Smith, and that would have been a really cool way of like, oh my gosh, you're my son. Oh my gosh, that's my grandson. It would have been a great scene. But in the very next second after he says that, he realizes, oh, this isn't my father. You don't even look like my father anymore. That must have all been in my head. And then he just moves on. And, a writer less inclined to think through the themes of the story might just look at that scene and go, so random. What does that even mean? Well, it's very obvious what it means. If you've read the story attentively and looked at the themes, it's a great cap on this character's story arc, because he's been chasing after his father, the idea of his father, and trying and find father figures and other characters, and really trying to see, does he measure up? Would this father that he'd never had be proud of him, and so forth? And in that moment where he's literally saying, hey, John Smith, meet John Smith, basically showing that he named his son after his father, he didn't like point to the grandson or anything. So he's also basically saying, I'm you. I did the father thing that you didn't. You had a child and never raised him. I've got a child here. Meet the real John Smith right here. Meet the real father here. You know, it's there are more to it. There's more to it in the book like that, but you'd have to really kind of read the story to get that. And if you're thinking about it through the themes, it was very powerful. I was like, that is so cool. That's a great little scene. And I would have been insulted if he'd have taken the time to explain it to me more, like with some, interiority of the character and so forth. Like, no, come on. So he's a great writer in that respect. He really does he doesn't fill in gaps that you should be reading alertively and attentively enough to fill in yourself. Alec Purdue for the super chat. Thank you so much there. Said for $2, what qualifies as a ripoff and what's inspiration? That's a really great question. A really great question. And on some levels, Floating Dragon could just be an inspiration for it. The idea of a city or a community, a little town with an generational evil from within. That's not copyrighted, that's something as old as folklore and whatnot. So that's it's very easy to see how it was inspired by that. But there are specific aspects to it. The fact that there's a little group of individuals. They're not all kids in Floating Dragon, but a group of individuals who come together and they find that they just have this unexplainable bond to fight this thing. And one of them is really, really good at directions and navigating. And the thing ends with them being under the town, and one of them has to navigate and direct to get out of the town. There are a lot of little things like that you can just see Stephen King directly yanked off from one character in this book and put it onto his character in another book. That's just one example, but there are a number of different things like that. They're friends, they co-author novels together. So it's not like, there's legal trouble or anything like that. And maybe Straub wouldn't have even called it ripoff, but as a writer or as a reader, I'm looking at it and going, that crosses the line from inspiration to straight up stealing an idea. Come on. So, that's a good question though. It is. Floating Dragon, I used it as an example when I was talking about characterization last time. And I said that it's possible if you have really good characterization, if a reader is really having fun spending time with the characters you've created and spending time in the universe that you've created with them, that's great. And sometimes that can even cut you some slack, even if your plot is a little bit, or the tension starts to lag or whatever. And that's the case with Floating Dragon. As I said, I really was expecting ghost story levels of quality. It's not ghost story levels of quality, but you do love the characters so much. It takes a while to find those characters, though. Now, when I come across a book like this, I'm going to read the whole thing because it's part of my scholarship, right? I'm reading Floating Dragon for enjoyment, but it's not just for enjoyment. It's not just a summer read or something I'm picking up just because I want to enjoy it. If it had been a book I was picking up just to see if I enjoyed it, I would have put it down. Because you go a long ways into the book before you even know who your main characters are. It's one of those books, and Summer of Night by Dan Simmons does this too, where he wants to just like drop a crap ton of exposition about this city on you first. And that's really bad writing. And that's something that thankfully Stephen King didn't do with it. He took all these cool ideas and he started with actual scenes, actual characters, actual stakes, and it was, you got that little scene of Derry at the beginning, sort of in the 80s, in the modern time, when the time was novel was written, where like the gay guy gets, eaten by it. But it's not very soon after that. That's just sort of a setup. That's just sort of a hook to get you, knowing this monster, what's the mystery. And then you are introduced to some of your main characters and you grow to love those main characters. I mean, when you read it, you really do. You're going to find yourself in one or more of those kids, these adults remembering themselves being kids and whatnot. And it's, Stephen King does that when he's on. Stephen King can do that very well, really writing about real humanity. And, as he says, good fiction is the truth inside the lie. You're writing about fantastical things, sure, but you got to tell the truth. You got to really, bring out the truth of humanity within these characters. And Stephen King can do that well. He's so prolific. He's one of those writers who's so prolific that he just doesn't do it in a lot of his work. Because you can't hit that level of quality when you're churning out a book a month, so to speak. Not that he literally does that, but you know what I mean. But he does that in it. So I didn't quite Or I did see the characters in Floating Dragon. Once we finally get to the characters and I finally know, okay, these are the ones that we're supposed to be following, it's a lot of fun. But it takes a long time to get there. So if you're going to pick up Floating Dragon, just know that you're going to have to sift through. And I mean, it's interesting history of the place. It's not boring, but I'm the kind of reader that I like to know who I'm supposed to be investing in. I want to know that early. I don't want to read a history of your city before I get to your story. Even if you're kind of building the story through the history, no, give me somebody to root for. Give me somebody to follow, you know? And you don't know that. And it's just like people that you think you're maybe supposed to follow up and die, you know, all of a sudden. And eventually you get to your core and then it's fun. It's a lot of fun to follow those. And then you can go back and get a little bit of history from it. And that's great. One thing Peter Straub does a lot in his novels is he really plays with the meta narrative. You know, there's one of the main characters is actually writing this book. He's like the actual narrator, but he's writing it in third person narration. But occasionally he'll say, okay, I'm breaking in now. I'm going to write this next part in my own voice because, you know, it's really important. There's only way I can describe what happened next is to do it in my own voice or whatever, you know? So, but this main character writing in third person allows him to have done the research after the fact, and he can go and tell you what so-and-so was thinking when this happened to them alone in their house and so forth, you know? So it's good. It carries his kind of meta approach to narrative. You know, it's got that, has great characters, but the ending, the whole setup, and this is something that Summer of Night did by Dan Simmons as well. You've got a reason, you know who the monster is. We have a basic reason, but it doesn't feel fully fleshed out. It doesn't feel fully explained. How exactly does this person slash entity, whatever, I don't want to give it away, so I'm just going to be very vague in my terminology. How does this monster get the power they had? What is even their real motivation? The motivation that I can glean from Floating Dragon for this monster is very, very thin. Very thin. I don't understand the monster at all. Now, in it's clear you've got this sort of Lovecraftian entity, ancient entity from space, you know, who's just there to consume and devour. And that works. It's more of an elemental evil. And that's fine. You don't need a character motivation for Pennywise, you know, beyond that. If it's that kind of villain, fine. But even in you knew more about what Pennywise's machinations were, why every so years it surfaces, how it goes about, what it specifically feeds on, and so forth. You know, Floating Dragon really didn't have that. It didn't have some good fleshing out of the monster. It didn't even. It was a cool way. The ending, the big battle, is cool at the end, but even that, I'd like to know a little bit more about why. You know, well, why though? Why? You know, when the kids in it go down to the sewers, it's satisfying, and you find out they don't quite kill it. You know, so when the adults have to go back, it's still satisfying there. You know how they fight Pennywise at the end of it makes perfect sense. Not like the crap movie did. The movie was so stupid. This is another problem with that idiotic movie, you know, the ones that were recently done. The 1990 miniseries, pretty darn well done, you know, for a 1990 TV series miniseries. But the crap ones they put out in theaters, it's just dumb. I think the first one just had the kids like yelling insults at Pennywise at the end, and that hurt him because it took away his power. I'm like, what? It's like the ABC story of the week or something now. Suddenly, it was just dumb. But so yeah, Floating Dragon didn't really deliver on that front. I do like it. I'm not crapping on it all altogether. I really like the story. And I think there's a lot of great things. If you like Stephen King's It, pick up Floating Dragon. There's a lot of good things in it. You get Peter Straub's very literary minded. So he's going to make a lot of allusions and come up with this sort of, you know, invented history, you know, that's a lot of fun. And like I said, he's really good at themes and character development, and a lot of really cool things go on in the book. Definitely. But I just think that because he's so, what's the word? He's so nebulous about some of the ideas that he's not really paying attention to laying out the common plot, you know, the foundation of it that we need. Um, So I could say more, but that's basically Floating Dragon. I just, you guys like when I give reviews on things that I'm reading. I do. If you liked Stephen King's It, if you've read the novel Stephen King's It, if all you've ever done is watch movie Stephen King's It, I don't really know if you'd like Floating Dragon. If you can actually tackle the reading of Stephen King's It, which is a big book, and you enjoyed it, then you will like Floating Dragon. You might have some of the similar problems I have with it, but you will like it. Couple super chats here. Let me get to before I miss them. Owen Lister says, I know reading good books can also help you with improving writing. Absolutely. For your own story. I'm currently reading some short pulp stories like Solomon Kane, hoping it will help me improve as a writer. You're absolutely right. Now, with pulp stories, especially like Robert E. Howard, Solomon Kane, you need to understand, I'm sure you do, but one needs to understand that these are pulp stories. These are not literary fictions. And I don't mean that in a snobby way, because Robert E. Howard is amazing. And you can really glean a lot from, like Edgar Rice Burroughs too. There's so much fun that they capture in those stories, and you can really read that and try to glean from that. What you don't want to do is you don't want to learn how to be a prose stylist from like Edgar Rice Burroughs. His prose is awful. But you know that when you read his novels. You're like, I'm not here to learn how to construct sentences and get a good prose flow. I'm here to really learn how to capture the fun of the story like he did. That's great. So yeah, pulp stories are great too if that's kind of stories you want to write, but just make sure that you know what you're wanting to glean from them. Don't learn the wrong lessons, because some of them weren't so great at certain aspects of writing. DFLS Studios, thank you so much. Said, what is a meta story and meta narrative? What I mean by that is, yeah, that word meta is kind of thrown around a lot today, to the point where it doesn't really mean much, or it doesn't always mean what it should mean. Meta is sort of, think about metaphysics, sort of the study of existence itself. So if a story is kind of meta, think about Scream. I don't know if you saw the first Scream movie or any of the Scream movies. Scream is a horror film, and the characters in the film kind of know they're in a horror film, right? They're like, oh my gosh, this happened, that happened. Okay, well, in the movies, here are the rules. If you do this, you die. If you have sex, you die. If you do that, and that was meta. It was kind of like a self-awareness almost to the characters in the movie. Now, it doesn't always have to be the characters themselves who are self-aware. It can just be that the prose itself is sort of self-aware. Like Watchmen, the actual graphic novel Watchmen, is kind of a meta narrative in a lot of ways, because he's playing with the different levels of narration. He's telling you the story not only with the panels and comic panels, but there's also news clippings. There's I think scrapbook, from different characters, so you're thinking, okay, well, how trustworthy are these different levels of narration that I'm getting? Do I really trust that journalist that wrote that article? Because some of the things in Watchmen are skewed, by the media. Do I really trust this one character and their reminiscences? Because you jump from that then back to a third person omniscient, just for the actual comic panels, supposedly. So it's kind of playing with the idea. It's when a story really, and I enjoy that as a writer and a reader. I enjoy that. You can do it poorly and you can do it too much. Um, on a silly level, it's kind of the same thing as Deadpool breaking the fourth wall. It's kind of meta, but you can do it in a very literary way, which I think Straub does quite a bit in his books. Let me, before I jump into the chat a little bit more, let me just cover Summer of Night, because that's a good follow-up to talking about Floating Dragon. Because again, Summer of Night came across my radar just looking up book lists where people said this book or that book is sort of similar to Stephen King's It. And I actually downloaded it, bought it on Audible before I even realized the author, Dan Simmons. Then I realized, oh, Dan Simmons of Hyperion infamy. Because I didn't read Hyperion, but Sound Engraver did, and she had a lot of problems with it. And she was telling me about it the whole time she was reading it. And it's just not, it didn't sound like anything I'd be interested in whatsoever. But she had said, some people said that his horror is better than his science fiction. So give that a try. So I did. And I'm glad I did. I liked Summer of Night too. Like Floating Dragon, I liked it. But there's some issues with it. In Sound Engraver, just to share one of her comments here, she said, Dan Simmons is quite indulgent with his novels. He can write short stories very well. He's to the point and horrifying. And, that's a really good observation about Dan Simmons. I agree with you, my dear, because one of the things I've noticed in Summer of Night, but also in Children of Night, the second book I'm reading now, is that he can get you in a scene so well. Like there's a scene in Children of Night, the second book I'm reading now, where this woman's trying to adopt this infant baby from Romania in like 89, so still, are during the Soviet era still, or right towards the end of it. And she's trying to adopt this child, and she's in the airport, and she is like the security officers, and it's like, is she going to make it out? Is she going to get on the plane? Are they going to, what's going to happen? It's very tense. And they're like, man, I'm so wrapped up in the scene right now. It's really good. But then he turns around and spends like way too long. Like, I'm just getting sick of these scenes where he's just like glorying in the fact that he's trying to take vampirism in Children of Night and make it like a hard science fiction with medical terminology. Like, this is the hard medical science of how vampirism would work. I don't care. I don't care. You didn't tell me I had to be a med student to care about this book. And there's just like so many long stinking diatribes and characters going off about all these explanations. I don't care. I accept it. I'm reading a vampire novel. Yeah, and it medically sort of makes sense. Whatever. Get on with the scene. Get on with the characters. Get on with the plot. And he did that in Summer of Night too. Summer of Night really hooked me. Again, it takes a long, he starts with a big exposition dump of the history of the town and the school building and blah, 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 blah. And he finally gets to some characters. And it takes me a while too to really even kind of learn which characters are going to be my core characters that I follow, because you can only have so many characters. And it is a group of young boys who are kind of see themselves as the bike patrol. It's set in 1960 and outside of Des Moines, I think. But it's really good. The characters that he develops are so awesome. You really like these characters. You'll have your favorite or whatever. He didn't really tick me off. One character does die. Well, a lot of people die. It's a horror novel. But one character that I really liked, that I was like, oh, this character is so awesome, ends up dying. And I'm just, didn't want to forgive him for that. But he made me forgive him because some of the other characters that I hadn't quite bonded with, I ended up bonding with, after that. So it was really, the characters are so great. You want to spend time with them. But again, same complaint that I had with Peter Straub's Floating Dragon, but even more so for Dan Simmons' Summer of Night, is that he doesn't really flesh out what this threat is. Sort of what it is. It's got some I'm not going to give everything away, but he brings up some, you go back to the Borgias in Italy and cursed objects. I won't give anything away because if you want to read the novel yourself, I won't give anything away, but cursed objects making their way across, the ocean to the New World and so forth. That's all interesting. That's great. But then somehow like Osiris is mentioned at one point, which is fine, but develop it. Then they're never mentioned again. And I'm like, well, you can't just say, ancient evil thing from Europe-y stuff, and that's what's happened. That's the bad guy. No, I need more than that. Again, really tell me, is it a purely elemental Lovecraftian evil like in It? But if you have human involvement in it, like both Floating Dragon and Summer of Night did, then you need to flesh that out more. You need to tell me more about the humans involved. What are their motivations? Because humans are going to have some motivations, and it's it needed a lot more of that. The ending to it was really, or the resolution to the good versus evil was really unsatisfying. Really unsatisfying. I mean, it turned out the way I wanted it to turn out, but it felt like, and apparently from what Sound Engravers told me and from some reviews I've seen of his other stuff, this is the case with a lot of Dan Simmons' work. It's like his interest in the novel that he's writing ebbs and flows as he's writing it. And when he's interested, he's writing really cool stuff that gets you interested. But then some of it just feels phoned in. And then when he's interested in it, he doesn't go back and rewrite the phoned in stuff. He just keeps rolling from there or something. That's how it feels as a writer. I don't know if that's the process, but that's very much how it feels. Now, there is a character I did appreciate. I didn't know, and I was asking Sound Engraver because she'd read Hyperion. It's a really, I think, a great representation of the Catholic Church in this, horror novel, Summer of Night. I thought it was really great. She said he's not that charitable or that kind to the Catholic Church at all in Hyperion. But one of the characters, shows up again in Summer of Night as a priest, much older, in the late 80s. And so far I'm pretty impressed by it, because I mean, as a Catholic myself, and you don't have to be Catholic to you get this. I just don't like I don't like two dimensional bullying of religions. Even as a Catholic, if it's doing the same thing to Muslims, or something that I would have a great deal of issues with in terms of their belief system, I still don't like a two-dimensional unfair representation of it if you're going to use that approach to ostracize or pillory them. That takes me out of the story. And so far he hadn't done that, in what I've read of it. But Summer of Night, another, if you've liked it, that's unabridged on Audible, and it's a fun read. It's a good narrator. Um, I would have read that cover to cover if I wasn't trying to finish up Floating Dragon cover to cover as I was reading that. So I picked it up on Audible, and I picked up the next one on Audible because I'm doing some Star Wars hardcover reading right now as well. So those are the two reviews. And again, those aren't reviews like you'd get, this is my beginning to end, I'm a professional book reviewer. No, I'm just telling you what I thought about them in terms of the way I was thinking about them, which is approaching them as novels that are sort of like it. I'm just looking for some more stories like that. It's kind of what I'm studying right now, you know. And as a scholar, you study that with primary text first, and you really have to really pour over the primary text and give that its due. And you can look at secondary text as well, some of the scholarship that's been written about it, but you need to take that with a grain of salt, because you got a bunch of idiotic political activists writing that nonsense.